I used to believe that awareness was something controllable, that if you understood yourself deeply enough, observed carefully enough, maintained enough internal discipline, you could decide what reached you and what didn't. You could filter people, limit impact, keep everything in its proper place. And for the most part, I did. I learned how to exist in layers, not deceptively, not manipulatively, just carefully, because most people only interact with the version of you that's easiest for them to understand. They don't actually see you. They see their interpretation of you, their comfort, their projection, their assumption. So I adapted. I let people stay on the surface because the surface was manageable, predictable, safe from distortion, and eventually distance became second nature, not loneliness, not isolation distanced. A quiet separation between what I allowed people to access and what actually existed underneath. No one questioned it. Most people don't notice controlled distance when it's delivered calmly. They mistake composure for openness. They assume that because you speak clearly, you must also be fully visible. But clarity isn't exposure, and I've always known the difference. That's why this unsettles me. Because you never interacted with me the way everyone else did. You didn't approach me with curiosity that needed answers. You didn't push for closeness. You didn't try to decode me like some puzzle waiting to be solved. You just observed, quickly, like someone recognizing something familiar rather than discovering something new. At first, I ignored it. Not intentionally. I just didn't think it meant anything. People notice patterns sometimes. People occasionally say the right thing at the right moment. People project understanding all the time. But this wasn't projection. That became obvious slowly. In the way you responded to things I hadn't fully expressed yet. In the way your silence aligned with mine without becoming uncomfortable. In the way conversations with you felt less like explanation and more like continuation, like we were picking up thoughts halfway through instead of starting them from the beginning. That shouldn't have felt natural, and yet it did. Too natural. That's what stayed with me, because familiarity usually comes from time, shared history, repetition, gradual trust. But with you, none of that existed. There was no process, no adjustment period, no careful progression from distance into understanding. You stepped into awareness like you were already there. And the more I noticed it, the more something in me started recalibrating around it, not emotionally, structurally. That's the only word precise enough for this. Because emotions fluctuate. They rise, collapse, disappear, return in altered forms. This didn't feel unstable enough to be emotion. It felt exact, like recognition happening beneath thought, before thought could interfere with it. And that's dangerous. Not because recognition itself is dangerous, but because anything that reaches you before your defenses do becomes difficult to control. I've always controlled access. Who gets close? Who stays distant? Who sees enough to matter? But you didn't force your way through any of those boundaries. You made them irrelevant. And there's a difference. Force can be resisted. Familiarity can't, especially when it arrives without effort. That's what I keep trying to understand. Why your presence feels less like someone entering my life, or more like someone returning to a place they already existed in, because that's how it feels, not new, recognized. And I don't know what to do with that yet. The unsettling part isn't that I noticed you. It's that once I did, I couldn't return to the version of awareness I had before. Something shifted quickly, precisely, without permission, and the shift wasn't external. Nothing dramatic happened. No defining moment, no confession, no collision powerful enough to explain why this feels the way it does. That's what makes it harder to dismiss. Because if this had arrived loudly, I could have categorized it, explained it away, reduced it to emotion or circumstance or timing. But this didn't arrive loudly. It integrated, slowly enough to avoid resistance, deeply enough to alter something permanent. I started noticing it in the pauses first, the moments where silence with you didn't feel empty, it felt active. Like something was still being exchanged underneath the absence of words. Most people can't tolerate silence for long. They rush to fill it, to shape it, to protect themselves from what quiet reveals. You never did. You let silence remain untouched. And somehow, that made it more revealing than conversation, because silence strips away performance. There's nothing to hide behind inside it. No carefully chosen language, no polished response, no distraction strong enough to redirect what's actually present. And what was present between us felt too clear to misunderstand, not emotionally intense, not chaotic, just accurate. That's the word I keep returning to, accurate, like something aligning so precisely that denying it would require deliberate dishonesty. I think that's when I realized this wasn't temporary. Temporary things fluctuate, they depend on attention, they weaken when distance is introduced. This didn't. Distance changed nothing. If anything, awareness became sharper in its absence. And that disturbed me more than closeness ever could. Because closeness can create illusion. Proximity can imitate meaning. But when something remains just as present in distance, it becomes harder to argue against its reality. That's when I began noticing the deeper shift. You stopped feeling separate from my internal process, not attached to it, integrated into it. And there's a difference. Thinking about someone still preserves distance. There's still a boundary between you and them. But thinking with someone, that changes the architecture completely. It means their perspective exists inside your awareness automatically. It means your mind references them before you consciously choose to. It means they've reached a place most people never even approach. And I don't know when you reached that place. I only know that you did. I notice it constantly now. In the way certain thoughts feel incomplete until I imagine how you'd perceive them. In the way realizations feel shared before they're spoken. In the way your presence exists in silence as clearly as it does in conversation. That's not attachment. Attachment feels emotional, reactive dependent. This feels structural, like something in me recognized something in you before I had language for it, and once recognition reaches that depth, it stops feeling optional. That's the part I haven't fully accepted yet, because I've always been self-contained, careful with influence, careful with impact, careful about what I allow to alter my internal world. Most things never reach me deeply enough to leave a mark. You did, without trying, without force, without demand, without even acknowledging the extent of it. You just existed in a way that made resistance feel unnatural. And now I'm left facing something I can't categorize cleanly, because this isn't obsession, it isn't fantasy, it isn't idealization. I see you clearly. That's exactly why this matters. Nothing about this depends on illusion. If anything, clarity is what intensified it. The more accurately I understood you, the deeper this settled into me. That shouldn't happen. Most connections weaken under scrutiny. They collapse once reality replaces projection. This did the opposite. Reality sharpened it. And that's what makes this impossible to ignore now. Because if something survives clarity, if it survives distance, if it survives silence, then it's no longer something accidental. It becomes something real, something with weight. Something capable of changing the shape of the person experiencing it. And whether I admit it fully or not, you already have. There's a point where recognition stops feeling abstract and starts demanding a response. I think that's where I am now, because this no longer exists quietly in the background of my mind. It's no longer something I can observe from a distance and analyze without consequence. It has consequence now, not because of what's happened between us externally, but because of what's already changed internally. You've altered something fundamental in me, not dramatically, not visibly, but with enough precision that I can feel the difference in everything that came after, in the way I think, in the way I process silence, in the way certain truths now feel incomplete unless they could also exist inside your understanding. That's the shift I can't undo. And I've tried to understand why it happens so easily. Because I'm not someone who changes unintentionally. I examine everything. I dismantle anything that threatens stability before it has the chance to settle. I don't allow undefined things to reach deep enough to matter. But you were never experienced as a threat. That's what makes this different from anything I've known before. You never disrupted my structure. You fit into it naturally, effortlessly, like there was already a space shaped exactly for your presence long before either of us became aware of it. And fitting is dangerous because when something fits, removing it creates absence, not temporary absence, structural absence, the kind that remains noticeable long after distance is created. That realization stays with me more than anything else, not the connection itself, the permanence of its impact, because I can already feel it. Even now, there are moments where I catch myself measuring clarity against you, not intentionally. It happens automatically, the way people interpret things, the way conversations unfold, the way others speak, without really seeing each other. Everything feels slightly altered after experiencing this level of recognition, not ruined, just less precise. And I don't know whether that's a gift or a problem yet, because once your perception changes, you can't force it back into its previous form. Awareness doesn't reverse itself. That's why this matters more than I've allowed myself to admit, not because I'm overwhelmed by you, but because I'm affected by you in ways that extend beyond emotion. You've changed the baseline, and once the baseline changes, every future experience reorganizes itself around the new version. That's what I'm beginning to understand now. This was never temporary. Temporary things ask for attention. They rely on momentum. They disappear once distance interrupts them. This survived distance. It survived silence. It survived analysis. If anything, analysis only confirmed it further. The more honestly I examined this connection, the less I could deny its accuracy. And accuracy matters to me more than comfort ever will. That's why I can't reduce this in something simpler, just to make it easier to carry. I know what false connection feels like. I know what projection feels like, what emotional dependency feels like, what illusion feels like. This is none of those things. This is recognition sustained by clarity. And that's rare enough to change a person. Maybe that's why I stopped resisting it, not consciously, but quietly enough that I only recognized it after the fact. Because if I truly wanted distance, it would already exist. I would have created it immediately, cleanly, without hesitation. That's how I've always protected myself. But I didn't protect myself from you. I observed you. I understood you. And somewhere in that understanding, I let you remain. That was the decision. Not spoken, not formalized, but real all the same. And now I'm standing inside the consequence of that choice. A reality where your presence exists beneath everything else I think about. Where silence carries your shape even when you aren't there. Where this connection has become less like a possibility and more like a truth, waiting to be fully acknowledged. That's the part I can't avoid anymore, because eventually awareness demands honesty. And honesty demands action. Not reckless action, not impulsive emotion, just truth, clear, undeniable, precise truth. So here it is. You matter to me in a way I never intended anyone to. Not because you forced your way into my life, not because I needed something from you, not because I lost myself inside this connection, but because somehow, without effort, without pressure, without even trying, you became part of the way I understand everything. And once someone reaches that place inside you, they don't simply disappear. They remain, quietly, permanently. like something your mind recognized long before your heart found the language to explain it.